welcome back to another Beyond Our Value, continuing education with TimberHP. So I'm your host, Dan Edelman. You can see some familiar faces online. By all means, this is very interactive. This is a spooky building science investigations. We're going to be going through quite a lot of different investigations that have been there, that we've all seen in the field. And, we're going to be seeing, more and more attendees kind of creeping in here, kind of keep with the Halloween theme. So I did want to introduce myself. I'm with Timber HP, Dan Edelman. I pretty much work in the Mid-Atlantic region, and with me, with Timber HP also is Paige. And Paige, I've been now working alongside her for close to about 10 years. So Paige, if you want to just do a quick introduction.
Okay, I'm Paige Malloy, Territory Sales Manager for Connecticut, Rhode Island, and New York State with Timber HP. As Dan said, we've worked together for quite a long time, starting at a previous life in a mineral wool nightmare, so to speak. And here we are at Timber HP. So what I'm going to be doing today is kind of sitting sideline. I'm going to be fielding questions, Q&A typed in. I'm going to let these guys work their magic. And the name of the game is my camera will be off. When my camera comes on and you see me, it means somebody needs your attention. So it's get ready for a question coming from the audience.
Nice.
Thank you, Paige. And then, yeah, I'll go to you next.
Hey, everybody. Walt Tamala, owner of TNT General Contracting, a build, design, educate firm based out of Westfield, Massachusetts. Been in business for 31, going on 32 years now. Started right out of high school. And my spare time, I sit on the board for 3 of our tech schools and are all about bringing our kids up into this industry and making them realize just how good of an industry and what a great career it is. So if you're a builder out there and you don't work with your local trade schools yet, think about doing it. I have co-ops, and these kids are great. They really want to be here. These schools are no longer, if you can't cut it in high school, you go to a trade school. These kids are energetic. They want to learn this trade, and they want to be there. So yeah, thanks for coming on, and we're going to have some really good stuff to talk about here.
Yeah, and thanks for joining us once again, Walt. And definitely thank you for what you're doing out there with the education portion of it. Um, I'm a proud father of a soon-to-be trade show or trade school son. So he's going to Pennsylvania School of Technology in next year for 2025. So that's very exciting. Next, I'm going to go up the list. So next, Randy Rand.
Yeah, so I'm Randy Rand, owner of our Haas building here in Orono, Maine. Also the training director for Passive House Maine. We do training statewide in the state of Maine for contractors learning anything from the energy code of building to passive house construction. We're a traveling roadshow and we go just about anywhere. So anybody in Maine that's got training needs, please reach out and we can take care of you.
Thank you, Randy. Thanks for joining us once again. And then special guest, we have Doug Horgan.
Hey, everybody. Doug Horgan. I'm a remodeler and custom home builder in the Washington, D.C. area, part owner of BOA. And we're just a big company that does that kind of stuff around here. And as I was saying, I got to do a lot of troubleshooting. And so I have pictures of things that went horribly awry. Perfect for tonight.
And then last but certainly not least, Chris Lomer-Giddens.
Hello, everyone. I am in Atlanta, Georgia. I am with LG Squared, and we are architects, builders, consultants. We do HVAC design as well. We get into the nerdy stuff as well as the pretty stuff. And we've had a chance to do a lot of helping our clients. We don't help kids like Walt does. In fact, we just tell kids to go find another profession when they come to ask us. We're just mean like that. Not really, but anyway, so we get an opportunity to get in and help people find their issues and fix them, and that's where some of this came from tonight. Yeah.
Thank you, Chris, and I'm really glad that you got out of the typewriter repairman business from about 10 years ago. So I'm glad that you came to the dark side, and now you're
Yeah.
able to help us with these building science investigations.
Yeah, well, this is the last day. I'm starting shoe sales tomorrow.
Oh man.
Yeah.
So, and one thing that you're going to note is that we do have different climate zones here. So we have 3, 4, 5, 6, and maybe 7. Maybe. I don't know, Randy. Are you on the border?
We've got climate zone 6
You have 6, and
and
7 is no more in
seven
Maine.
in northern Maine.
Yeah, yep. So yeah, pretty much everywhere. So what we're going to talk about today, vapor, air, and water issues, it's all kind of normally together. Why do buildings fail? We're going to go through some of these investigations and why did they fail to begin with? Because I find that just historically speaking on my side, the remodelers are typically the ones that find why buildings failed to begin with and can normally build them better when they're building back because they see what happened and then how to correct these mistakes. And then of course we have the live Q&A. So that's going to be ongoing. Definitely use the questions and not the chat portion of it. The chat, feel free to chime in, introduce yourself, let us know where you're from and everything else. But definitely the Q&A is the one that Paige Malloy is going to be monitoring. And we're going to go ahead and get started. So I did want to start with a couple projects that we have been in. You know, TimberHP now is still a pretty new product in the US market. The wood fiber insulation category has been around in the European market for about 20 years now, 25 years. This is one actually in Washington, D.C. And this was a single family remodel edition, you know, full gut basically, and you could see just how nice and snug that fits in the wall cavities. We do have in the basement, it's above grade. We have quite a bit here. So that was the first one. This is Artisan Builders, and the installer was Founders Insulation. The next one was with our Timber Fill product, the blow-in. This is a double stud wall cavity. We have no vapor control membrane on one because it's Illinois. The membrane that picture is actually from Vermont. So that's where you will want to use a class 2 vapor retarder on the warm side, depending of the entire assembly, of course. But basically, then you could see some bat for sound, for interior wall sound as well. This is actually kind of exciting for all of us because this is, you know, larger commercial buildings are now getting accepted with TimberHP products. So with our new ESL or ICCES report that we have out, now you could actually use us in 1 and 2 hour fire rated assemblies. It's the entire assembly that really makes a difference, not just the product. So you can see that being installed in steel stud. This is a 900 unit build or 900 unit apartment complex in Hoboken, New Jersey. So codes are very stringent in this area. And then I'm going to actually just go ahead and pass the mic over to Walt Tamala. So this was kind of all of his pictures and walk us through the building science mystery and what's going on here.
So we have a lot of things that are going on here, and if you're doing remodeling, you've definitely seen this in your lifetime. If not, then be prepared because they're going to be out there all over the place. This is the triple whammy, where we had, you know, some moisture that got in. We had some building science gone wrong. Um, and when I say this, I mean it in the most compassionate way possible because the person who built this was a builder, and this was his own house. And the reality was he was building it at a time where codes said one thing and budgets allotted him only to do something else, right? You know, you're either one of those people that put all the money and do it 120% correct on your own house, or you're like, I'm tired of doing this all day long, so I just need, you know, to put a storage area and a workshop on the back of my house and call it done. And unfortunately, you're going to see that, you know, the home wrap that was used is frayed, it's fallen apart, which tells me it probably sat out for a little too long. So UV rays and everything else got to beat it up, deteriorated it. It wasn't installed properly. Um, you don't see it here, but actually in the bottom right-hand picture above the door on that roof line, you can see that we have a tiny corner. That corner of the main house is like 3.5 inches in from the workshop. There was no kickout flashing or anything put on top of that roof. So the reality is water hit that corner, dripped down onto what he thought was a weather resistant barrier, and then came right into the wall assembly. If you look closely at that middle picture at the top, you're going to see that that's actually the inside of the wall assembly. So that is drywall, and that WRB was cut like an X, which is the worst thing possible, and it was wrapped up and inside and tacked to the framing. So that means all the moisture that should have been released came down on top of that header, worked its way back in, and then sat there on top of the door and that entire assembly. So again, one of the things that we see that's wrong is that we need to force all this moisture and everything else and give it a way to come to the outside of our wall assemblies. And we need to plan that it's going to get in there, because it will, whether it's 2 years down the road or 200 years down the road, right? So it's just a matter of taking the time to figure out how and why. This was planned to be a non-heated space. So where we're going to get into some vapor control and issues is that the main part of the house is a garage. It's a 3-car garage with living space above it. This was built back in the 90s, so code said it needed like R19 in the ceilings or in the floor system. Guess what type of insulation is above that garage, which I would have tried to treat as an attic space instead. Yeah, it's R19 and it's fiberglass, and it was terrible. When I walked in to the shop that I thought was going to be unconditioned space, it was actually really warm inside. And that's because he had a door opening that there was no door in, and all of the heat that's on the second floor was emitting down into the garage. And I know we all say, well, how does heat transfer, right? You know, heat cold is always going to draw heat, so even if it's below you, it's going to draw heat down. That space was warm, and we then had moisture on the inside, on the back of that drywall. So as I started to pull drywall, there was mold everywhere. Again, this builder thought he was following code, he was doing it right, and within 30 years he's now had to go back through and redo everything. This was a scrap. We really took it all the way down to the bones to rebuild it. But it was a really good experience in the essence of talking to another building professional and saying, hey, this is why we have groups like today's session. And this is why we don't just follow code, because code is the bare minimum. It's our job to really do the research and to question it. Like, why does this work? Why doesn't this work? And am I creating a space with all the insulation components and the values and the proper WRBs and moisture resistance systems in place so that I'm not going to have issues later on? I don't know about you guys, but I say it all the time when I'm teaching on stage. I build houses that are going to last hundreds of years, not 7 or 10 years or whatever, people are living in a home before they move. So, Paige, I see your picture, so I'm going to shut up and turn it over to you.
Unmute, Paige.
Yeah, sorry, it didn't click through. All right, thanks for following the rules. Well, just one person wanted to double check in case they missed it on this slide, particularly location and climate zone, just to double check, make sure everyone.
Sure. This is actually in my hometown of Westfield, Massachusetts, so climate zone 5.
Thank you. And we'll have a good question coming up after this. I'll jump back in.
Awesome.
Great. So again, we've had every type of an issue. You're now seeing termite damage and bug damage because it's warm, it's wet, it's everything they want. So again, I guess my biggest thing from this is just a reminder to everybody to take the time to be a part of groups and about like-minded thinkers in the industry, and to question, just because code says it, is this the right thing to do, or can I be doing something better?
Yeah, and I was going to add that too about moisture and bugs, because once something gets wet, normally the bugs move in.
Walt?
Yeah.
I'm wondering that bottom middle picture, I don't see a problem there. It looks like Pecky cypress and looks pretty cool. And then second question, is your door throwing up like insulation from the inside? What is that at the bottom there?
Yeah, that was it was a nice fix. They decided that they would use spray foam where the threshold was missing now because it was rotted out and gone.
Nice.
Oh boy.
Good heavens. That's so ultimately what happened? You take the whole thing down and rebuild it or what?
Yeah, so some of the frame was still solid, but everything got scrapped. And basically it was starting from scratch.
Yeah. Takes a lot more to try to salvage all of it than to
Yes.
just do that sometimes.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Walt.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the next one, and this is one that I found or I heard about somewhere. I got the picture, but this is actually more for everybody out there to kind of chime in with what you think the issue is. So here's some of the facts. So the home was built in the 1950s, had gable vents only, no soffit to ridge. They blew in fiberglass insulation about 3 years ago. You can see it there. The homeowner complained of major settling of the insulation in one spot, and they noted mold growth on sheathing. So kind of chime in with the chat if you guys on the panel want to start, uh, you know, figuring out what's wrong with this.
Is this around you, Dan?
What's that?
Is this
Yes,
around where
this
you are?
is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Climate zone 4 or 5. Yeah.
Yep, probably climate zone 5. I believe it was near like the Scranton, PA area.
I don't
Any
see
thoughts,
a
Doug?
I don't see a baffle.
So I'm going to try something new. So I just put up a poll that you should be able to see. So what is causing this issue? So the first one is basically, the insulation added. Was that the issue? Was the house was built in the 50s? Was that the issue? Gable vents or the exhaust pipe from the water heater that isn't insulated? So just chime in with the
Bingo.
poll and you can kind of, we'll check it out.
It's
But
just in
guys,
the
what
one
do you guys
spot.
think?
Just in the one spot, Dan, that you have the insulation
Correct.
shrinking
Yeah,
and the
that's the
mold
only
and the
spot that they
condensation.
found it
Yeah.
settling.
What was
All right.
below this space?
That I'm not sure. It was just regular living space, I would assume.
And this started to show up, or they noticed it in the winter.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
The water
Yeah.
heater is outside.
No,
Yeah,
but
the
that's
water heater. So that's the pipe, the original pipe going up that was uninsulated for the water heater.
Outside.
That was right in the exterior wall.
Coming up the exterior wall.
Yep.
So there's no venting here.
Right.
Soffit-
And there's
soffit venting.
not a lot of venting with just the gable vent.
Yeah.
So Randy, that would lead you to start to think that it's the added insulation because the attic's not breathing, right? But then we should see it everywhere.
You would see it
In a
everywhere.
located spot.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only reason I asked for the ventilating because sometimes when we've seen soffit vents like this, when they do have it vented, but their bathroom exhaust comes out just below the soffit vents and it sucks right back up into the attic, and you get this. Yeah.
That pipe is hot, and when it's cold inside, it's getting wet, and it's shrinking. It's making all those. It's just coming from that. It's coming from that pipe. Seems like.
And is that a propane water heater? Is that what you said?
I want to say natural gas. Yeah.
But a lot of moisture then going up through that chimney.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of the consensus that it looks like from everybody. So yeah, obviously the added insulation probably didn't help. The gable vents or lack of ventilation. But yeah,
The other thing
exhaust.
I'd want to know is are there any light fixtures buried under that? Or any other air leak sources right there?
That
the
I'm not
insulation?
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
hard to say. I mean,
I would
The-
guess that there's. Oh, go ahead, Chris.
no, I was just gonna say the pipe, not knowing anything else, the pipe's a good candidate because it's heating up that cavity and the pipe itself is emitting heat into the insulation. So it's just kind of translating over into the drywall area. So go ahead, Doug.
I would guess, based on a lot of houses in the 50s just have giant holes chopped in the top plates when they have systems running through them. So, like on my house, I lifted up the 2-inch rock wool bat and I could see my basement ceiling from my attic. So that was a
Yeah.
source of a lot of air leakage from the interior. And adding the insulation probably kept the sheathing a little cooler than it otherwise would have been. And that might be enough for the more
Mhm.
moisture to drop out on the sheathing. But it's just a guess.
Yeah, and that actually kind of leads me into the next one, which is this is a little different case, but similar to what you were just saying, Doug. Home built in the 1740s, so a very old house. This is near me again. Unvented roof system with asphalt shingles. It was slate for many, many years. The current owners have owned it for 30 years. They just added a brand new roof with a ridge vent. But ever since they did that, now the house has higher humidity and cases of mold in the basement. So what do you think is going on there? It is a all stone house too,
All right,
with
this is where,
with balloon framing.
Mhm.
this is where where's the
In Pennsylvania. Yeah.
where's the framing that we're looking at?
The framing is on the this is on the interior of the basement. That's the basement ceiling basically.
Ew.
Yikes.
And that's just recent, ever since they got the new roof.
Hmm.
They add irrigation for
There-
that lawn too.
They, I believe, did too.
Is there more than just adding okay, so added a new roof with a ridge vent. What else did they put in the roof?
They added more insulation, but without air sealing.
Hmm.
What kind of insulation?
That does, I'm not sure exactly.
So I think one of the keys that come to my mind quickly was the fact that you said balloon framing. So with the fact that there was probably no insulation there before and you were getting that direct channel from your basement to the attic and moisture could get out easier. Now with you slowing that travel down, it may have elevated the moisture levels in the basement.
And it does, yeah. And that was another point I forgot to add on here is rat slab, no vapor barrier on the ground. So there is a lot of moisture in the basement.
That was the only thing they did is they redid the roof.
Yeah.
Well, that and added some moisture to the yard.
And
right?
more insulation. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Randy, I think you're spot on, buddy.
Yeah. All right. And then we get into the vapor monster with Chris Lommer Giddens. Chris, I'm going to pass it over to you. You should be able to share your screen.
Oh, let me get it going here. Okay. A minute. Where are we? All right. Okay. So I'm gonna just what I'll do is just walk through this is a project here in Atlanta, Georgia, and the issue is in this area. Okay, this is this is built about 10 years ago, maybe, and the whole house is insulated with spray foam primarily. This is a flat roof up here, but the problem is in this area. And what we found, there's so many issues. This house is full of moisture. We had to rip out a lot of rotted, nasty sheathing. So the problem is in this area. We had to remove the window, replace and re-flash it and redo the drywall inside because it was completely rotted all around the window frame. So the first thing you think of is flashing. So we'll take a look. Well, first of all, it is an open joint rain screen cladding over 2x4s on a house wrap.
Hey, Chris, what were the indications to the homeowner that there was an issue in the first place?
Wet trim and drywall.
The interior.
Yeah, on the inside. Yeah. So this is 2x4 running, just a 2x4 rain screen. That's where they attach the cladding to. Again, I'm circling the area. The source came from somewhere inside this circle, and we have the flashing around the window. That's what it looked like before we pulled it off. It doesn't have flashing here, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you that it didn't have to do with that because it is an open joint rain screen. I'm just showing that to you. So, okay. And then you see the tape, the flashing is good, right? It's shingling properly onto the top of the window. It's flanged window. There's the bottom. Looks okay. And there's the tape. You see an issue here? Probably. There's this, but is this the source of the problem? The entire window frame, the entire rough opening was wet. So back to, this is where the problem is. First, so again, this entire frame, entire rough opening, it's all wet. All the drywall, all the trim on the inside is wet. I'll take guesses now before I start honing in on the answer.
So that top tape looked like it was over the top of the WRB instead of underneath it for one, right?
No, it's supposed to, the WRB overlaps the flange and then you tape that.
Okay.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So I've
right.
seen a similar thing at my folks' house with a deck on top of living space, and it was the kick out flashing between the deck and the second story, basically.
Right.
So I'm going to say that might have something to do with it.
Okay.
And there's no overhang, Chris.
There is no overhang. Hey, what do you mean? There's a 6-inch overhang right there. All right. Anyone else? I can't see the chat. So if anybody's in the chat.
Yeah, Paige just jumped on. So Paige.
I was thinking of some things, but I'll read what's in the chat too. Connection point at the deck, wall to upper roof is leaking at the corner. The
Okay.
roof deck above may be sending water into the top of the wall above the window. I would agree with all of those, and my input is covering up the ways for water to escape that little assembly detail. So
Right.
it's just been building up, and by off chance, does the tree shade it too much to dry?
Right. Possible.
Hmm.
I like it. I
Is
like
it
it.
the north side of the house?
You are getting warm with that, with your first guess, with your first theory, where the roof meets the wall. You're getting warmer. Anyone else? It's definitely up in this area.
Taco.
No kick out flashing.
Are you ready?
Yep.
It's right there.
Well, because I didn't seal that penetration.
So that's a railing attachment, and they attached it right to the stucco, just screwed right through the assembly into the sheathing with a single screw and nothing else. No flashing, nothing, no sealant. These are the layers. You got a house wrap, and you got there's no gap there for drying out. There's no rain screen, but they went right to the sheathing. Behind my hand here is where they attached it. This is from the side, looking at it from the side. And so this is the owner, and he got out his this little tube, and we did a little test. Don't worry, Dan, it's quick.
Yeah, no.
Running down. Let's see. Let's make sure, and it's popping out at the bottom.
Wow.
Like a
That's
waterfall.
actually terrifying how quick that.
Terrifying. So
Yeah.
so it's going, and you can see how all the wood sheathing is wet. It's because the water went, and now look at this. This is where this is where we see
It
where
literally
the
followed that
actually
same
happened.
path.
Wow.
We pull the house wrap back. Look at that puddle of water.
Oh,
Yep. So what it did is it hang on. What it did was went behind the water would come down the wall because there's no overhang above it either. It went behind the house wrap and down the sheathing, down right over the window. And so there it went. It just came down the wall here behind the house wrap here. That's why you didn't see any damage there. But all of this is rotted. There's now you can start to see when you peel this back, you see all this rotted wood in here. And then it builds up down in under here. This is some zip system that we just reinforced until we started pulling stuff off.
mm-hmm.
There, it all went in right inside here, and then around all the window, and just so we replace it. So this whole house, this is just an example of a builder who just didn't, or whoever it was, not paying attention, obviously, to some of these water management details. This was on the other side of the house. And this
Same
is,
detail.
this is just the mush. Just so easy to pull it apart. And it's, and then just other areas. This was under the TPO and just bad detailing, that causes all this migration. The bottom of the wall had to be ripped out. And all this down here is spray foam. So of course it's holding all that moisture up against the sheathing, just making it worse.
Wow.
So
Well, thank you, Chris.
Yep.
You really are the vapor monster.
I'm sure I visited that house years ago before I got into this business. I was kind of setting up my future work. I was like, well, if I can go as a vapor monster into houses, destroy them, they'll call me later when I sound like an expert,
Yeah. How many things other than that railing did you look at before you landed on the railing?
Well, we peeled off all the siding and looked at it, and then it just, as soon as I saw the railing hit the stucco like that and saw that the screw, no flashing there, it was pretty immediate that you could, just standing there. For me, we did look at that roof to wall connection for sure, but there was no evidence of it going beyond that. So once I saw that penetration there, I said, give me a hole right there, cut it open, let me see it. And I could see where it was going out behind it. But that $12,000 job that we were supposed to go fix that one window because of all the other stuff we found turned into $75,000.
Cool.
Because we had to rip up all the TPO, redo the deck. And then on the other side of the house, more flashing issues. It just kept going. And he said, okay, I don't care if there's more damage, please stop. I'll just live.
I'm selling the house as is.
I'm moving to Australia and I'm done. So
yeah. Paige, you had another question come in?
Yep, we actually had a more of a discussion question come in, but it seemed like a good time to kind of pull it up. So Chris in the chat put in residing project in climate zone 6, considering crane board, vinyl with integrated foam and rain channels. Contractor says going over old masonite and fiber cement is okay. Saves on disposal costs. Your thoughts?
Wait a minute. Say again, the product that they want to put over another product is a vinyl with foam?
So it's going to be vinyl with integrated foam and rain channels over old masonite or fiber cement.
Okay. I can't. Well, you know what I'm going to say, man.
Yes, do it.
Okay, foam is a 4-letter word and it's an F word. Vinyl will degrade and warp. These are two products we shouldn't be building with. I would recommend a similar option, but with a different material. I think you need to also make sure that what's behind the existing cladding, and that you're not just hiding anything that's going on behind there. It's certainly worth pulling it off to see what's going on behind before you put anything new. And in that case, just if you're taking the old off, put something new. I understand budget's a concern, but it may make it worse in the future because of the same things we found on that project that I was just showing you. It was just like it was behind multiple layers of things. And so certainly pick something different and put it in and replace it and make sure what's behind the existing. I mean, that's not knowing a lot of details yet. That's just on the surface.
Yeah, at face value, I'm always afraid to just cover something up with something else and bury it in the wall, because it tends to be the problem we go back to. But just thinking about building science-wise and improving a building, siding is one of the easiest times to address air sealing. So what better time to then strip it off, air, extra attention to your air sealing, and then put something back over it. So
yeah.
I would say I don't really understand what the foam does for you when it's glued to the back of the vinyl siding. I mean, the only good thing about vinyl siding is there's usually a fair amount of air blowing around behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's all you have the budget for, it usually doesn't fail right away in the middle because it has air movement that can dry stuff out. But if you stick a bunch of foam on there, then you don't have that.
Yeah.
And in climate zone 6, it's going to be pretty cold on the back of that foam too. You'll probably get frost accumulation over the winter. So I think it's a waste of money. It's actually worse than the product without the foam.
Those two products, they have different expansion and contraction rates, and they have different conductivity. It's just those two, and vinyl does over time it does. I mean, we've seen it in windows primarily, but other vinyl siding and vinyl anything that's exposed to UV, they haven't been able to. The UPVC has a better track record for it, but the PVC products that are being used are very temporary. If that's what this project is, that's okay. But the foam, I would still waste. That's a waste because it's not necessarily doing anything.
Yeah. And we've seen the crane board up here in Mass. When it first came out, we messed around with it. We like the durability thought process of it. But vinyl has holes in the bottom of it because it's a natural rain screen. And when you fill it with foam and everything else, it's no longer a rain screen. I get that a lot of remodelers and folks out there are putting a foam backer board over the top of some cedar and such because they want to plane it out and make it level. But that's really all that's doing. And to Doug's point is you're creating, because it's not enough insulation, you're creating a space for moisture to build up and everything else. So it is a bigger concern. We have made it a protocol that anytime we're doing any exterior siding, we're stripping it down to the sheathing to make sure that there are no hidden issues. Otherwise, we're the last ones that touched it, and it's going to be our fault. So the reality is the only way we do justice to our client is to get to the sheathing and make sure that it's got a good WRB. And like Randy said, it's your best opportunity to do some air sealing and everything else, and give that house that may have been, drafty and made to last, because it's breathing that at that rate, an extra 50, 100 years. So take the time. The disposal cost is a lot less now than what it's going to cost you in the long run.
100%. Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you, Chris, for the question too, from the chat. Next, I'm going to pass it over to Doug, who has a bunch of other building science investigations. So one thing I did have to note is, unfortunately, there's a lot of content when it comes to building science failures. And then fitting it a lot in 1 hour is a challenge. So we could definitely do this again. But I'm going to pass it over to Doug. You should be able to share. your
Yep.
screen, Doug?
Any day now. Give me a sec here. I did this wrong. Yeah, I'm an idiot. All right, there we go.
Yeah, there are so many failures out there, and I mean, everywhere you look.
Okay.
Were you able to share it?
I am totally failing at this. Let's see how this goes.
Okay.
I'm
Yeah,
used
Paige.
to doing this on multiple monitors, so it is mine.
So while we
Ah.
let
I'll
Doug
just
do
do the
that,
screen.
I'm gonna jump in.
Yeah.
There he is.
Ready? Building in zone 6 wall detail. White pine timber frame. Vapor permeable layer. Want to do timber HP board, 2 layers for we only know of 2-inch thickness. Then a rain screen sheathing and outer board and batten. Does this sound accurate?
So the rain screen sheathing is behind the board.
On top of, well, the way the details numbered.
Yeah, from inside outside, it's
It sounds to me like 2 and 4 should swap. Your vapor permeable should be on the sheathing layer. Yeah, it does. It looks like it's okay. White pine timber frame. Got it. Now, okay, I got it. Understood. It is in the right order. Got it.
yeah. Yeah, it sounds great. Vapor permeable, rain screen.
Yeah, sounds
Yeah.
like a standard wall assembly to me, but
Yeah, the perfect wall.
I would still, you know, as a intuitively, it sounds right. But what I would suggest is a hygrothermic model to ensure that you're not putting any of your sheathing at risk or anything, because it is climate zone 6. I would just make sure that that's enough insulation on the outside to handle to keep your sheathing away from the moisture risk category area. So always running those moisture analyses anyway, no matter what, even if I've done the wall assembly before. So that's just, in theory, it looks great, but just make sure you have enough insulation and that the vapor control membrane doesn't necessarily, you could need it to be closed, but that's the hygrothermics will tell you that.
follow-up
That's
question.
something that we could definitely discuss more too. So
Yeah, I
with
have
the
some opportunities to discuss that coming right up.
okay.
Perfect. Then we'll let it be with that.
Yeah.
And then just so
Uh,
if Tom can hear me in the chat, sorry, and I'll jump off in a second, Doug, I'm sorry. I will copy and paste the assembly details so everyone can see inside and out in the chat if they want to dissect it on their own.
Yep. Awesome. Thank you, Paige.
All right, back
Yeah,
at.
that's great. Thank you for your patience with setting that up. All right, let me just jump right into this. So this is those of you who are in climate zones north of 4. I'm here to tell you that our weather is coming your way. And we all need to be thinking about the vapor drive that comes from the outside of the building toward the inside. And that's the theme of the night. All right, this is an actual thing we actually built. We built a wine cellar in the middle of a ranch house, slab on grade, vented attic, and the so single story assembly. Clients called us in like August, a year after we built it, and said, "Hey, there's something weird going on. There's like some water leaking. There's stains on our wall. Can you come check this out?" So I was looking at that wall thing, and I started poking around. I look up above the ceiling light, and wow, that is not what I want to see in something we just built a year ago. That's all mold growing up there, biological growth of some kind. I got rust dripping out of the light. It's
Cool.
beautiful. So obviously there is a wine cellar. Wine cellars like this have a cooling contraption inside them, and cooling contraptions do normally create condensation under some circumstances. So I thought maybe it was leaking out of this, and it is all wet underneath it. But after I kind of lifted the thing out, I realized that there actually wasn't water leaking out of this system. There was just condensation on the cold parts of it. So it wasn't a leak from that contraption. So I ran up in the attic to see what I could see up there, and I see this, you know, really top-notch insulation job. This was kind of existing and kind of like our electricians. We actually had to throw the electricians off this job and hire some new ones anyway. So this is what I see, and I start picking up these bats, and they're soaking wet, absolutely covered in water, sitting on top of the 6 mil plastic on the ceiling. So there's an actual puddle, and I'm wringing water out of these bats as I'm looking around on the ceiling. I had to shop vac it, and you can see this is actually right above that light. And I don't know if you can see, they kind of cut the plastic very crudely around the light.
Mm-hmm.
The place where that thermostat is down in this wall, where water was kind of rolling off the wall, off the plastic down the wall. And you can see all the way around the water staining the top plates. So who's got a thought? How did all that water get up there?
This is so the entire sheet layer is wet over the whole ceiling.
No, only over the wine cellar. So actually, you can see this is the wine cellar side, and this is the wet half of the top plate, and this is the next room over here. No plastic, no water. No problem.
That wall mount unit, that was dedicated for the wine cellar?
Yep.
That's the only conditioning that it had?
That's right.
And no dehumidification?
Not other than that unit, which does have a drain pan and condensate pump and all that.
Okay, but it didn't have dedicated dehu, or was it sized with enough drying or moisture removal capacity?
Latent capacity.
Yeah.
I'll make a long story short and say yes.
Okay.
Was it for storing red wine or white wine?
Makes a difference.
Temperature difference.
Yes, most of our clients store both in the same room. So what temperature do they pick?
Oh,
55.
And if it's apple wine, it's even colder.
Oh, yeah. No apple wine in the houses that we're working on.
It seems like a systems thing that the systems weren't managing the moisture well enough, whether it's ventilation. These wine cellars and natatoriums and anything that needs a certain temperature and moisture, they're very specific, and I would assume that it reached dew point quite often in that space and didn't have a chance to evacuate because of that vapor closed barrier.
Reasonable guess, but up here in the attic, is that inside the space or on the other side of the space?
Could be outside.
Yeah, it's on the other side, so it's almost like it's condensating because of the hot temps and everything else in the attic, right?
Yeah, it isn't actually the hot temperature, but that's a kind of a coincidental aspect of it. Now, what it is that room is at 55 degrees, and the top of that drywall's not much warmer than that. And the dew point that we get around here, it can be above 70 for 2 weeks at a time in July. So in a vented attic, your dew point's going to be, in some cases, actually a little bit higher than outdoors due to hygric cycling.
Sorry, real quick, the moisture was on top of the plastic, not under?
Correct.
Oh, okay. I in my head, I had it backwards. That's why.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes total sense.
Yeah, so the top of that drywall is very cold. Water cannot evaporate through the drywall into or soak through the drywall. Moisture cannot go through the drywall into the wine cellar because we put 6 mil plastic on top of it because the directions for the wine cellar device said to do that. And then we put vapor permeable insulation on top of it, and the outdoor humidity was able to get down there and condense on top of the 6 mil plastic.
And
So go ahead.
and the way that it looked like it was installed, there's a lot of air movement through there as well. And that
Yes.
insulation in general is much lighter density, so more air movement. I mean, we've seen fiberglass, all of us have seen fiberglass act as a filter when there's enough air movement. So
100%. Well, that was a terrible installation job. So there was
Yeah.
direct access of the air to this cold drywall, cold plastic. So, you know, it turns out that all the rest of the ceilings in this house are exposed to the same outdoor air and the same moisture level. They're not quite as cold. In fact, they're like 20 degrees warmer. So
Mhm.
it's not nearly the
They're
same
above-
temperature delta.
They're above that 70-degree dew point.
They might be. Some days they won't be. I mean, some days the dew point's going to be in the high 70s and the temperature setting is going to be way lower than that. But on the rest of the ceiling, the moisture will just transduce through the drywall. I mean, drywall is very permeable, and the moisture will enter the interior and get taken out by the air conditioning and dehumidification systems. So it doesn't cause a problem. The problem was that we trapped it all on top of this 6 mil plastic. All right. Yeah, set to 57 degrees in there. Okay, do we have time to do one more?
Yeah. We're known to run a little over too, Doug, just so you know. But no, we're gonna end it. But yeah, we have time for one more. Doug, did you freeze?
I was gonna say, I think you froze.
Yeah. Man, that dew point, it's up there.
It got to him.
Yeah.
Oh no.
All right. Yeah, I
Hey,
guess we
what do you got?
lost Doug. So, Randy, I don't know if you were able to oh, there's Doug.
Oh,
Couldn't have made this happen in a worse possible way.
Not a problem.
How do you like that?
You want to
I
go
stay in
through
the
the
office, so
picture
this would
hanger?
work. Sure. Did you guys decide how we fix this?
we don't even
Oh,
know
we
what
did
it was.
How we fix the oh, am I sharing screen yet? No.
Yep. Oh, not.
Oh, was I? Let's see.
Yeah, you were frozen for
I
the last
apologize. Yeah,
minute.
I don't know I mean, my
No
Zoom
problem.
rebooted. So there you go. Okay. So how did we fix this? And the hint is it's a 4-letter word.
Oh no.
Low cell spray
Oh
foam.
yeah. Yeah, we use closed cell spray foam. A couple inches of closed cell spray foam. The top of that closed cell spray foam is way warmer than the dew point. So no condensation there.
Yep.
When did you do?
Okay.
When did you do the spray foam?
In terms of what time of the year?
How long ago did you do that?
It was probably 10 years ago, maybe
Okay.
more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you removed the plastic and
We did remove the plastic.
Good
Yep.
choice.
Yep. And then we covered it all with the bats.
what did you do with the damp material? Did you replace the damp materials also?
Yeah, I mean, yes, we cut out a lot of the stuff on the inside of that where all the water had dripped down. Yeah, we're big believers. Stuff with biological growth on it, it gets out of there.
Yeah.
Okay, so in this situation, as I said, this is the advertised one. Some clients called us middle of July and said, "Hey, Doug, this weird thing happened." Sorry, let me take 2 steps back. This is a awesome, incredible custom home. You'll see a couple pictures on the outside. One of my favorite houses we've ever built. It'd been up for I think a year and a half, 2 years. Anyway, clients call us, "Hey, Doug, this weird thing happened. Picture, a mirror fell off the wall last night while we were asleep and woke us up. Just fell right off the wall."
Ghosts.
Yeah,
Wet drywall.
poltergeist, spooky.
Wet drywall.
That's right. Yeah, so Chris knows. Chris is from even more humid place than me. Yeah, so let me go back to this one. The mirror was over here, and this is an exterior wall of the house facing east. And when I got there, there was this sort of, it had actually torn the wallpaper a little bit as it went out of the wall. And it felt kind of cool. So I got out my moisture meter. I was like, huh, I wonder if there's some kind of weird leak right here. And it was very wet. The drywall actually pinned my moisture meter. It was as wet as it could be. So I was like, oh, wow, that's unusual. Even when you have a flood, it doesn't usually get that wet. So I start checking the wall everywhere on the whole wall, top to bottom, left to right, the whole wall soaking wet, just as wet as my meter can read. So I was kind of finding that puzzling. So I started looking around. The next wall over, the wall that faces south, no problem. It's all fine. Interior walls, I'll read fine. You know, sometimes there's wallpaper glue, or there's wallpaper that actually has foil in it, and it'll make your moisture meter freak out. But not this time. I go to the next room, same situation, facing south, no problem. So the room we're talking about is here, the wall we're talking about. And I went up in the attic, all dry. I go to the room below, no problem. The room next door, no problem. All these walls, the moisture level is totally fine. In fact, there's nothing up in the attic but a bunch of dried out dead flies. Couldn't be more dry up there. So
What's the finish in all the other rooms?
different stuff. There's let's see, this one has some kind of a different type of wallpaper. This one is mostly actually shelves and built-ins. It's like a library. And this one has no finishes, unfinished attic.
So vinyl wallpaper in the problem room.
You are too smart for this
Yeah.
this story. Actually, that's good because I don't.
I'm a vapor monster, and
Yeah, that's
I
exactly right.
My
So,
water babies on vinyl wallpaper.
What does vinyl wallpaper do that other things don't?
Reverse vapor barrier in the summer months.
It's a vicious trap.
Yeah, it's an interior vapor retarder. So what was happening was, and I'll go on and on about this, but we ended up tearing out the walls. We had the mold guys in. You can't really tell in these terrible pictures from the year 2000 with my like 1 megapixel camera, but you can see how rusty the drywall screws were. Everything on the interior of the wall soaking wet. This is the drywall. You can see all the stuff growing on it. This is the sheathing. It's actually perfect. These fasteners are rusty. These fasteners are not.
Was there also a rain screen between the stone and the structure?
There was on the plans.
Well, of course they follow the plans, Dan.
Yeah.
Of course.
The plan said 2-inch airspace. That's a perceptive question that caused a lot of discussion around here, and with some lawyers and engineers and a bunch of other people. But this was in this weird interregnum where you didn't need to have a defined drainage space behind stone veneer because the way dry pack mortar is applied, water will drain through it. We don't do that anymore, and that probably didn't help any. There was definitely no air movement back there, very little. Anyway, we let's see what else. Yeah, I came up to this house one day after a heavy summertime thunderstorm, and this is the part of the wall that's wet. I don't know if you can tell which part of the wall is wet. It's everything except this. So even though this is a really fancy house with like 16-inch overhangs, a windy thunderstorm will put a lot of water on a gable wall. So every afternoon that there was a bad thunderstorm, this stone would get very wet. The mortar would absorb a lot of water. The next morning, the sun would be on it for hours, facing east, little coverage, and it would just blast that moisture right in. Yep. And then we have like a under 2 perm vapor retarder on the interior, and stuff was going in faster than it would come out, and it would condense in the drywall. So this is the message. Those interior vapor barriers are going to be a problem if you start having weather like we have. So anything you can do to make your walls permeable in all directions, probably something to think about.
Mind the gap.
That's
And
right.
that's something that I talk about all the time. No class 1 vapor barriers except for underneath a slab in a crawl space or basement.
I think
I'm
that's
good with
smart
that.
based on what I'm seeing here.
Yeah.
You know, there's a great, by the way, for the gap, this ventilation or rain screen gap, there's a great report by John Straub talking about what is the right size gap. And you can look it up and it'll tell you, he'll show you what happens when water is in this tiny gap up to a large gap. It's a really good report, nerdy, but it's good to know and understand. Look it up.
Awesome.
I'll paste it in the chat when I find it.
And last but not least, we have Paige back on. I just saw her pop up. So live Q&A.
Well, hopefully anyone else comes in. The last question I received was, solar vapor drive and masonry scares me. Is a vapor open assembly still the best option using adequate exterior insulation? Couple of inches in climate zone
So
question mark?
I would like to say that rain screen detail is going to be very helpful. That airspace between the masonry and your structure.
Yep.
Can't hurt. I do think, you know, there's a lot of materials that are already a bit of a vapor throttle. I mean, different OSBs test out different ways, but I think a generally accepted number is sub 10 and usually sub 4 firms, which, you know, I would guess that's probably pretty good. If you want to use a foam-based sheathing, that's going to be even tighter on the exterior, and I don't think that can hurt. There are tens of thousands of houses around here with poorly ventilated veneers that don't fail. I think if you can keep the interior vapor open, it seems like it mostly works, almost no matter what you did on the outside.
So one thing that your examples, or the second example showed, Doug, was something that we, you know, there's no one answer for everybody. Even one house to the next on the same street, next door to each other, can have different, I mean, the house next door might have been built exactly the same time, the same way, no issues because they didn't use vinyl wallpaper, or there wasn't a tree to shade it. There so much goes into whether it should be vapor open, vapor closed. Generally, if you have everything is vapor open to let your assembly, it's okay for these materials to get wet as long as they have a chance to dry in the right amount of time. They can stay wet for a little while, but not for too long. So that's where the hygrothermic modeling comes into play, but also just understanding where your shading is. Are you going to have the vapor drive or not? And it's hard to, I tend to really stay away from telling people, oh, this will work anywhere, you know, bam, you know, like this assembly, one house to the next can have a different, depending on how many people live there, how tight it is, what kind of activities going on in there, it could be different. So all of that is a factor, and it's just, it's important to understand all of it before there's just this, there's not a one size fits all, except for having control layers all the way around the building.
100%. I also think until you build 10, 30, 100,000 houses using a particular material, you don't know which ways people are most likely to screw it up.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're still learning stuff about house wrap. We're still learning stuff about everything.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of new stuff out there that we're about to learn stuff about. Looking
And that's
forward to it.
And that's one thing we're talking about with timber board, is actually having a little drainage gap built into it that will remove it from the sheathing about, 3/16 of an inch or whatever that is. Just to allow some drainage, just in case it gets between the board and the sheathing.
It does.
I like that.
We did that on our tiny house down in Florida, Dan.
Hmm.
You know, we got a lot of exterior moisture in Florida, and it
That's true.
it didn't hurt, and it wasn't helpful when we had it probed, and we were modeling the whole assembly, monitoring it, and so it didn't hurt and it didn't help, but it did reduce the R value of the total wall assembly slightly. So when you have a gap in your, if you're doing insulation back to front, if you have it in the cavity and exterior and you put a little air gap in there, even if it is 3/16 or 1/4 of an inch, it's going to reduce it some. Now, not enough to be that concerned, but it is just one less thing. And if that moisture risk is in the sheathing or right at that surface, there could be some buildup, and that's where that can come into play. But even in this house with 2 inches of exterior insulation and a full 2x6 cavity, it was we didn't need it, but it was good to monitor it. We did it on all 4 orientations too. So
Awesome.
it depends on the project. It could be a great thing.
Of course, yes. And we'll have both available, hopefully.
Right.
So, and that's pretty much all that I had. I know that we're a little bit over time. I did want to thank everybody out there for chiming in and participating here and joining us. We do these every month, the 3rd Thursday of every month. We do roundtables. We'll be doing other product workshops, things like that. I've always been a fan of having, you know, with the other builders and architects that are on here now, just increasing the collaboration and education that we have among all the climate zones. And sorry, Randy, you're going to be in basically Virginia climate zone in about 10 years now. So we could learn from each other. So Paige, I don't know if were there any final Q&A?
Nope, just thought I'd pop on to show my lovely
All
face
right.
before
Well,
the end.
thank you. And thank you, Randy, Chris, Doug, and Walt and Paige for joining. And it's been a good time as always. And happy Halloween, everybody.